Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Sari Kamen. I am the Public Programs Director of MOFAD. We're the Museum of Food and Drink. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you this evening to the fifth program in our Food for Thought series with the Greene Space. It's been such a pleasure working with them, and I'm so particularly excited about this olive oil exploration that we have planned for you tonight. I quickly just want to let you know a couple things about MOFAD, Museum of Food and Drink. We're based in New York, but we have been virtual since the beginning of the pandemic, and we've been doing lots of virtual programming, including this one. And our next virtual program with the Greene Space is on February 17th. It is called Uncle Nearest. It is actually an exploration of the overlooked stories of African-American whiskey distilling. It's part of our Black History Month programming that is happening all throughout the month of February. So I really hope you join us for that. You have the option of ordering some whiskey and participating in a whiskey demo. So it should be a really, really good one. That being said, olive oil is delicious. So I cannot wait to introduce you to our panelists this evening. First, we have Skylar and Giuseppe, all the way from Italy this evening. It is very late for them, so we're so excited to have them with us. Why don't you go ahead and say hello, Skylar and Giuseppe?
Hi, everyone. I'm Skyler. This is my husband,
Hi.
Giuseppe. We're the founders of EXAU Olive Oil, and we're based in Calabria, La Castella, Calabria, South Italy, and also Austin, Texas.
Awesome, thank you. And also coming in all the way from Italy, but a different part, we have Lorenzo from Casa Caponetti. Some of you are probably going to be tasting his olive oil this evening.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. It's my pleasure. And yes, it's a bit tiring to be here this late at night, but I look forward to this meeting. Thanks.
Thank you for staying awake with us this evening, Lorenzo. And finally, we have Viola. She's going to be moderating the program tonight. She's going to be leading a cooking demo and an olive oil tasting at the end of this. So I am just going to pass it over to her and let her take it away. So for the rest of you, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and hope to see you on February 17th.
Thank you so much, Sari. My name is Viola Buitoni, and I'm talking to you from San Francisco, where I teach people how to cook Italian food. I want to thank both MOFAD and the Greene Space for doing this, and more than anything, I want to thank Skyler and Giuseppe Lorenzo for being up at 2 a.m. But when you have your business, especially in olive oil, it's a 24-hour kind of lifestyle. So without further ado, let's talk about your olive oil. And we're going to start with Lorenzo, who will show us a brief video about his work.
Yes, thanks, Viola. This is a video that I'm happy to show tonight. This was actually made many years ago when I was teaching at the Culinary Institute. So I demand pardon if the quality of the image is not the best, but it's very good to me for me to show it tonight. It's almost 10 years to the day today since I was at the CIA last time, and this is a part of what I was teaching back then, which later evolved in an artistic project that combines music and images and olive oil and philosophy. But let's see the video first, and then we can talk more later.
Yes, let's talk after the video.
Yep.
Etruscans, our ancestors, the really cool people. Here is some of the ruins that we have on the very found ground that are dating from them. Basically, what we're seeing here is about 625 BC, which is when the Etruscans were at their peak. By then, they had already put in place what is called the urban revolution, which is the complete transformation of our land from prehistory into one of the most sophisticated agricultural system of all times. They had reached the peak of the power. They had given birth to Rome as a town. Between 1100 and 700 BC, the Etruscans were able to introduce features like private property of land, private names and family names, writing, and all that. What we're seeing here is one of the many tunnels that are left from water managing. They were able to create fresh water or to regulate lake levels, even present-day lake levels, or they were able to drain marshes. And marshes draining provided with muck, the most fertile soil ever, and large expanses with no trees. At the same time, in Greece was going on something similar. You know, the olive tree represented the fundamental of a society that is fixed, that is stable. A society in which you have tools to defend your work if necessary, which means, again, writing a differentiated society and a differentiated architecture. And those are the basis of what we call it civilization today. And then, of course, the Romans came in and they planted millions of trees across the Mediterranean. And some of which are still living today, which is pretty cool because it gives us the opportunity to taste something that the Romans had tasted. And by the beginning of our era, olive oil was already a staple, but it was also into the lore, into the myth. Both for the Greek, for the Etruscans, for the Romans, there's a very good reason why the olive tree is quoted 76 times in the Old Testament alone. There's a very good reason why the Greek lore makes Athena founding the towns of Athens by planting an olive tree. Again, one is the long lifespan of the olive tree, and the second one is the oil itself, which is a superfood that is combining calories and vitamins and keeping us healthy all through the winter and creating wealth, creating, tangible things that are coming out of this magic of a tree that can bear fruit in a desert. And that fruit is actually a superfood because there's no heat, no fermentation in the making. So the olive oil has enzymes that are still alive into the olive oil. And this goes beyond the Mediterranean, goes beyond food. It's in the culture, it's in the lore, way beyond ourselves.
Lorenzo, thank you for that video. Do you want to say a few words about it, or should we start chatting?
Well, as you saw, the video is very much centered not just on the olive oil itself, but on the cultural values and of the olive oil and the olive tree in the Mediterranean. I think this is something that struck me a lot because the farm that I'm farming, our land here is rich in ruins from the Etruscans, and for me to deal with something that can date and is so deeply rooted into the culture and and the lore of Western civilization has always been has always pushed me to look into the future. Dealing with something that is 3,000 years old, we need to leave a good legacy, and that's why it's almost 25 years now that we're organic and we're beyond organic, and we integrate the cattle and the pigs with the olive tree, and it's a whole ecosystem that is regenerative, and I think we're leaving a good legacy.
So Lorenzo, let me ask you, you talked about roots. I love that because you are in Maremma, and I actually spent all of the summers of my life until I was, well, I'm not going to say my age, but I spent lots of summers of my life in Maremma. And in fact, my mother is buried not so far away from you. So I love what you do. I love where you come from. And I am curious how, I know that your olive oil is sold to many chefs, use it here in the States. So how did you come to the States? How was this adventure? Why did you decide to come out here? And how did it happen?
Oh, it started by chance. Here on the farm, we have a small bed and breakfast. And many years ago, my father was smart enough to build one of the first websites. This was like the end of the 90s. And we attracted a few people from the US. And among them, there was this friend of us by now who invited me to come over to his place in Kansas City, Missouri. And basically I set out with a little can of my oil into the suitcase, seeking for fortune. That's how it all started. And then by chance, through the slow food community, I was introduced to the Culinary Institute of America, where I ended up the first time just listening to one of the class. And then by listening, I started posing questions and started commenting. And easier than not, I ended up being a lecturer there. And I spent a few years collaborating with the Culinary Institute of America, bringing students over here to the farm to help with the harvest. And again, all these people, lovely students, and lovely people in the faculties. Some of them are still some of my best friends to today. And they set me up with chefs, and I've been providing to Dunbar. I am providing to Dunbar, but I've been providing to 11 Mazur Park and Gramercy Tavern, a lot of different restaurants in New York City mainly.
So one quick question before we move on to Skylar and Giuseppe.
Yeah.
You mentioned 11 Mad and I think Gramercy Tavern. And can we ask which other chefs use your olive oil?
There's not so many other chefs that are using my oil. Mainly, I rely on a network of private customers, and that's what is giving me the strength and keeping me in business even through 2020. Dan Barber, he's a great friend, but a lot of the restaurants are struggling today. And what is keeping me going is the fact that through them and through the CIA and through the lecturing, I did a lot of talks, mainly pro bono, to restaurants and all kind of stuff, and I was able to gather customers that are private people. The bulk of what I do is pre-ordered before the harvest starts, and it's shipped within 48 hours. It's on the table, and that's what basically defines my business in this sense. It's not just of course I'm happy to work with the chefs, but it's not just the chefs. I think good food should be on any table if at all possible, and technology is possible.
Oh, thank you so much. So thank you. So now I know, Skylar and Giuseppe, that you use a similar type of business model. You also sell your olive oil before it's made. But before we get to how you sell your olive oil and how one can buy it, could you tell us a little bit about your business and what you do in Calabria?
Yeah. Okay. So we are olive oil producers. Giuseppe's family has been producing olive oil in Calabria, in this region, for almost 100 years. And so our estates are along the Ionian coast, within 100 meters of the sea, and it's very beautiful. And so each fall we go out and we harvest, and we usually use the squattatore, which you can see one of our guys is holding in the photos. And then we shake the olives so they fall off the tree, and we mill them as quickly as possible. We produce really high quality olive oils, and then we import directly to the US, and we sell direct to consumer, mostly through e-commerce. And we don't do a ton of wholesale, but hopefully that'll be expanding this year. But what we want to do is bring more attention and light on a region of Italy that has essentially been forgotten by the government and left to care for itself. Calabria, when we tell people we produce olive oil in Calabria, they often say Colombia. And I'm like, Colombia is beautiful, but that's in Central America. And we produce olive oil in Italy. And so there's a little bit of education that needs to happen with the different regions in South Italy and what's happening in Calabria. And so Calabria is one of the poorest regions in Italy. And simple things like infrastructure, railroad tracks, highways, like those are luxuries that we don't have down here. One quick example is to get from Puglia to Calabria, there's only like a two-way highway. And I'm from California, I'm from Oakland, California. And so that is the equivalent of someone in the Central Valley that grows and sells grapes, having to truck their grapes up to Napa Valley and only being able to make that trek on a two-lane highway. Like, that just doesn't work. And that's what we're dealing with down here. So everything logistically is kind of a nightmare, but we want to help bring attention to this incredible region that is just so it's beautiful and it has such a strong and old heritage, and the olive oils are incredible and unlike oils we've tasted in other parts of Italy.
So I have a couple of questions. So first of all, could you tell me how you, what kind of cultivars do you use? What kind of olives do you grow?
We have a particular one that grows only here. It's called the Carolea. We have Frantoio, Pendolino, Coratina, and Lecino.
I see. And do you press your own olive oil, Lorenzo, or do you work with local other small local businesses?
I don't have my own pressing facility on the farm, but I work jointly with another farmer who is a very good friend who has his own, and it's only like him and I and a few other farmers that are using that facility. And it's a facility that I know really well because I've been working there for the last 25 years. So I am in command when my olives are pressed, and it's kind of the best option versus having a smaller facility that will only serve my own olives. I think I'll go back with that.
Lorenzo and Skyler, do you undergo a similar process?
Yeah, we have a friend that has a facility. We go there because he owns 2 presses, one close to each other, so we can press in 7 minutes. So from our property to this press, there are 7 minutes. The time to go there, it's ready for us.
So, and Skyler,
it's a kind of a race. It's a kind of a race.
Skyler, I have a question that I know everyone who's here is probably wondering about. Well, first of all, how did you guys meet? And also, you are a Black woman in olive oil making. That is kind of about as rare as a white fly. So can you talk a little bit about that? First, about how you met and
Yeah.
How your experience as a Black woman in such a in an industry that doesn't have many Black women, and how did you adjust in Italy in this very unique and unusual position that you have?
Yeah, so Giuseppe and I met, I studied architecture, and I went and took an internship in Barcelona, and I went to Rome for the weekend, and Giuseppe was not supposed to be out. He had exams the following week. So he was supposed to be home studying, and his friend convinced him to go out for a beer. And thank goodness his friend did, because we ended up meeting, and we kept in touch. We did long distance for about 2 years, and we decided to get married. And then we moved to the US for a little bit. And then Giuseppe had the wild idea to start an olive oil company. And then we came back to Italy to start the olive oil company. And as far as being a Black woman in this industry, I think that it's much different in Calabria. And I think that my answer to this question is actually kind of the opposite of what a lot of people would expect to hear. I haven't gotten a ton of pushback here, or of course I get weird looks. Like when I'm at the press, people are like, what is she doing here? like what's happening? And the farmers come up with their tractors, and they're just very curious. But Calabrians are very, very curious people, and they just kind of want to know, like, first, like, what is a woman doing here? Second, I think that she's American. She's a Black woman. Like, what's happening? And they're very nice and curious, and just come up and be like, so what are you guys doing? And then we tell them we have an Italian-American olive oil company, and they're over the moon. They're like, you're telling everyone about Calabria. This is amazing. What kind of olives do you grow? What's happening? I want to see more Black women in this industry. There's a ton of barriers that stop that from happening. First, access to land. Black people owning land, it's a much bigger hurdle. That entry point, and especially with owning such a large amount of property, that's hard to do. Like, olive oil is not something you get into just on a whim. It's a time commitment. Olive trees take 7 years to even be mature enough to harvest olives from. And so it's kind of a luxury career unless you already have a foothold in that industry. A friend of mine says that in California, it's kind of like what people with tech money get into when they're bored. And I think that's a very realistic thing that happens in this industry. And I want to see more women. I want to see more women in this industry because I'm always in meetings alone. And I want to see more women of color in this industry because we need it. And we're going to make things better.
Women make things better, and we do want to see people of color more in agriculture in the States, and especially women of color. So yeah, you have my support. So let's now get the three of us to chat about a little bit about olive oil. So first of all, we already got a question from the audience, which is about the famed Xylella fastidiosa, which is devastating already the crops of Salento going up towards past Brindisi, towards Bari in Puglia. How are you getting ready for the possible arrival of Xylella fastidiosa? And we should also say that Xylella fastidiosa is a bacteria that kills olives by constricting their lymphatic vases and travels with the spirobug and came to Puglia in an ornamental plant years ago and is now devastating the olive oil region. Are you scared that this might come to you, and how is Calabria and Toscana getting ready for a possible arrival?
I can answer first. So we found a way that is very defensive, is to work often the soil. So in this situation, there is like a little bug that bites the tree that has Xylella. Is a vettore, it's called, and it's called sputachina. So if every time we till the soil, there isn't a problem that this sputachina can reach the tree. So this is the best defense we found until now. So every time we till, and then we have like a bad environment for this bug. But I think for us to reach here, the Xylella is very hard.
About Lorenzo, how are you feeling about the Xylella?
I think the Xylella is, in a sense, is similar to COVID today. I mean, we are definitely living in a world that is changing and is getting globalized. You know, they both are diseases that are coming from far away, and they came in like in a whim, and we had to cope with that. I think I like what Giuseppe said. It's very important to upkeep the land. At the same time, we need to understand that the world is changing. My way of coping with this is try to keep my trees as healthy as possible, which goes by fertilizing a lot and having healthy soil and also having a healthy ecosystem. The Xylella is traveling rightly on the sputachina, and the sputachina is a small bug. And as any small bug, they have somebody in the ecosystem that will eat them if the population ever goes too high. And at the same time, again, we want to know that the world is changing. So part of my answer to this is diversifying into the farm as well. Never put all of the eggs in one basket, which means that, again, I have cattle, I have my pigs, and the way my cattle and my pigs are integrated with the olive groves, it also pays back. It plays a role in diversifying. So I don't have all of my eggs in one basket.
I see. That's very interesting. That's a great. The love of the integrated agriculture. That's wonderful. There seems to be a lot of curiosity about, first of all, the olives that you use. So I know, Lorenzo, you use Canino and you do a monocultivar. That is the only one. Could you spell Canino for us, please?
Yeah, Canino is the local variety here in the region where we are. The fact is that I'm actually based in Tuscania, is the name of the town for us. We're falling out of the Tuscan border by a few miles, and the town and the region take the same name from the TUSC route of the Etruscans. So maybe 2,500 years ago it was the same thing. But the Canino variety is local from here, is a variety that is similar to the Tajasca, for anybody who knows about it. Is a variety that is very peculiar in the fact that it has very wide body of fruity flavors, and we enhance this by grinding on stones. That is also helping and contributing, creating all of the different volatile compounds that we can feel through the palate and the nose. And it's very fruity. I like it a lot. It balances it off a lot with the bitter components from the antioxidants and all the vitamins. So I'm happy with that, and I like a lot what I'm doing.
And Skylar and Giuseppe, you use, it seems to me that you use a mix of different olive oils, and the audience is asking that you spell the name of the different olive oils that you use. So go ahead.
So we have 3 different oils. 2 are blend and 1 is a monocultivar. Of course, the monocultivar is Carolea, which is the main cultivar in Calabria.
And can you spell that for us?
C-A.
C-A, sorry.
C-A-R-O-L-E-A. Carolea.
And that's the Calabrian one. And then you mentioned that you use Lecchino as well.
Yeah, Pendolino, Mantoio, Coratina.
Do you want us to spell Lecchino?
So yes, I want you to spell them all.
Okay. Lecchino is L-E-C-C-I-N-O. And
Coratina?
Oh, let's do Coratina next. So Coratina is C-O-R-A-N. Wait, Cora-T-I-N-A.
Okay. And then Pendolino, which is P-E-N-D-O-L-I-N-O. So these are all the different olives that we are looking at. And I am assuming that you choose them for different characters. And what are you trying to achieve? Are you looking at, their fruitiness, or their bitterness, their softness, their sweetness? What do these olives have that make you want to use them, other than the fact that your family was cultivating them?
They have all 3 different characters. The Lina is more fiery and very, very bitter. Polyphenol are very high. If you think that at the beginning of harvest, we reach 1,200 polyphenols per kilogram, it's very high. And after we have a Carolea, which is in the middle, and it's very balanced. It probably is the most balanced in our product. As a sensation of fruit and floral, and you can test also tropical fruit inside. It's amazing how it compares well with a lot of food. And after we have the Evus, and this particular one is kind of lighter and gentle, respect the other 2. And this one also has fruit forward, respect the other 2, especially Speddelina, which has a really strong taste.
I think there's something to be said about also when the trees were planted, because there are some of the Lecchino and Pendolino are older on the property. So those trees are almost 100 years old. And then we have some Carolea that are almost 100. And then we have others that are 30 years old, planted by Giuseppe's father. And then we have a couple younger trees, or a group of younger trees that are planted by us. And then we just planted a whole bunch of new trees. So we have these multi-generations of trees, and they're growing together and developing together.
So we talked about the cultivar, and I know that the other 2 elements that are important in determining the character of olive oil are, well, first of all, the terroir, or the area where you are and what it looks like, and then, of course, the decisions that you make around harvest time. So let's talk a little bit about the terroir. And Lorenzo, could you start? And yes, I apologize. I do know that Tuscania is in Lazio and not Tuscany, and I often get them confused because they're so close. But yes, I do know that. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about the terroir where you cultivate your olives.
Well, we're at the very fringe of volcanic soils, which is very good for the olive trees. Olive trees, they need a lot of sun, they need some drought, they need a lot of air, and the volcanic soil is some of the best soil in the world that we can have. This is all dating to maybe, last activity of volcanoes here is about 150,000 years ago, but it's very well drained. It's like being on a sort of a sponge that is the sponge and is able to retain about 1/3, if not more, of our yearly rainfall. And that's really good because olive tree has a very peculiar need in terms of water. We want the tree to go through a couple of months of complete drought in the summer in order to produce the antioxidant. At the same time, it needs to have what it needs to stay alive. So our soil it's very, very specific. I'm very happy with that. And the gentle breeze, we're not far enough from, we're close enough to the sea in order to still benefit from, all the salts coming from the seaside. And that's also something that is really good. And we are in a terroir that is really unique in this, not unique, but it's fortunate. We're organic since 1998. We're in the middle of a region that is fairly organic and fairly good in that sense. And so we have a lot of wild greens, a lot of herbs, and you can smell a lot of that into my oil, especially the wild fennel, all of those summer herbs, a lot of rosemary, a lot of laurel that are just endemic to our area, to our region, and that all comes through the olive oil in terms of smell, and that's something that I like a lot.
What about you, Giuseppe and Skyler? What does your olive oil area look like?
We study the triangle of the soil. In our property, we have tuff, clay, and sand.
Tuff is like a sandstone for American.
Beside that, we have like a lab for us that work for us with the chemistry, and we want that the parameter of carbon organic and nitrogen organic is on a certain level. So also the magnesium and potassium. So every 6 months, there is the chemistry that go there and check that everything is fine. When everything is not fine, we use a technique that is called sovescio, which means the planting of leguminose. It's a kind of a legume. It's called favino that we make it grow inside the property organically, of course. And this creates an environment bed for herbe intestanti, like the bed weeds, and create a better soil layer for us because keeps the soil more moisturized by the water. And later we can do technique like leaving a pachamante is called it. We cut the favino and we leave there in order to leave on the soil to kind of destroy this plant and became like a manure, or how you say, organic compost.
Compost.
Yeah.
So, and Giuseppe, what decisions do you make around harvest? Do you harvest early, late, and why do you make those decisions? What do they do for your olive oil?
Oh, that depends of the year. There is something a real problem for organic farmer like us. It's called the fruit fly. So the fruit fly can come in the moment that is more humid and put the eggs inside our fruit. So in order to have less damage, we anticipate the harvest.
Yeah. But it depends. I mean, it changed every single year. Also, we're right on the water. Like we can see, if you go on our Instagram, we can see the sea from our property, but we're high up on a cliff. So we have a lot of wind. It's very moist and humid year round. Right now, we're in a full out battle with the wind right now, which we're going to lose. That's the nature of this industry, though.
Speaking of Instagram, Skyler, should we tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find you guys on Instagram, the handle, just so that, go ahead.
You can follow us at EXAU Olive Oil, so I'll spell that. It's EXAU Olive Oil on Instagram.
And I should say this, that Skyler Giuseppe's olive oil was chosen as one of Oprah's favorite things, wasn't it? She featured you. So yeah, I agree with Oprah. It's delicious. Lorenzo, and tell us, first how to find you on Instagram, and also tell me a little bit about your harvest philosophy and what it does for your olive oil.
Well, the harvest is of course the big time on the farm. We are shooting to harvest generally early to very early. The fact is that on every tree we have olives that are ripening at different times. So on the same tree at the same time, you will find olives that are completely green and some that are red and some that will be completely black. Now, there are some things happening during the ripening. The green olives are the ones that are fullest in antioxidant and are fullest in chlorophylls. The red phase is when the total yield of oil into the olives is going to flatten out. And the black ones are the ones that are fuller in fruity flavors. So we want basically to have a mosaic when we harvest. We want to have maybe a solid 30 to 40 to 50% olives that are still green, bulk of them that are red, and some that are completely black. And that's usually happening between late October and into mid-November. And that's when we want to shoot for the harvest. Then, as Giuseppe and Skyler were pointing out earlier, it's crucial that we press within the same day. So each days of harvest gets into the mill the same day and gets pressed the same night. And that, by the way,
that is crucial to getting a good olive oil, right? I mean, olives that sit and they are poorly stored will affect the quality of your olive oil, right?
Well, absolutely. Olive oil, we have to think about olive oil as something that is fresh because it's the only food that comes to the table after being processed, in which the enzymes that were into the olive are still alive because there's no heat and no fermentation involved in the making. It's nothing but a physical squeezing and a separation. So anything that happens to the olive is going to affect directly the quality of the olive oil. And the bulk of olive oil making is preventing something from happening. Is in this sense, I say that olive oil making is a lot closer to honey harvesting than wine making because we cannot control, or we have very limited control of the chemical reaction that go on during the making. But before we go on into the olive, let me go back again just 1 minute to the harvest itself. The harvest, I say, is crucial and is critical. And back in the old days, I was maniac about harvesting each and every olive on every tree. Like today, maybe because I'm getting older, or maybe because I have changed a bit the way I look at things, by adding the pigs to my farm, I'm actually only shooting to harvest maybe 75% of what's there, which means that we can concentrate on average maybe 50% of the trees we have. Because anything else that is on the tree and is not either perfect or is not full, the tree is not full enough, we better leave it on the tree and then hog it down. I have my pigs that are right now in these days that they're eating, they're grazing on the olives that we didn't harvest last November. And that is something that is making us a lot more efficient, but it's making us a lot more embedded into the ecosystem. And again, this goes also by what I was saying earlier about being, diverse on the farm and try to be, again, it's just this concept of one welfare that, it links us to our animals, to our trees, to our employees. And I think, that's another thing that I like about what I'm doing.
So, thank you. I have to interrupt you because we're getting a lot of questions for the audience that I want to try to get to before we do the tasting of your marvelous olive oils and cook with them. Yeah. So, first of all, there is a question about the flies. Do you have a problem with the olive oil flies? There's someone from Napa is asking. Apparently, that's an issue in Napa, and they're wondering if you have the same. Skyler?
It's an issue here. I know it's an issue in California because I have friends that are dealing with it. And it's a timing thing. You do the best to avoid getting fruit flies. And then if they arrive, you need to take action very quickly. because you do not want them ruining your olives. Like prolonging the harvesting process and pushing it off later and later because you want to get more oil from the fruit is not going to work with fruit flies. Your acidity level is going to increase. There's going to be defects in your oil. You don't want to do that. And also harvest, just to tack onto that, a lot of people think that harvest is just a couple days. Depending on where you are, even here in Calabria, it's all the way from the end of September. We started September 28th. We finished our harvest like November 28th, a couple days after Thanksgiving. There's people here that harvest all the way through December and their olives are still green. So it just depends on where you are and your cultivar.
So, and also someone wants to know the character of your olive oil. I'm sure it's always delicious, but does it change a little bit according to the year, to what happens a year, weather and other factors?
It changes tremendously. I mean, Giuseppe and I were just talking about this. We had all of our oils paneled last week, and we're like, this is the same blend as 2017, but the flavor profiles are totally different. Having the notes of the tropical fruit with the Carolina is not something we had previously in 2017 or 2018. This year we have notes of tropical fruit. Usually we're getting a finish of pine nuts. We're getting more vegetal notes on the nose, hints of green apple, bitter almond, and we still have many of those things still happening with our oils, but it changes every single year, and that's why we love it, because you don't know what you're going to get.
So also, briefly, Lorenzo, you both have very old trees, both Skyler and Giuseppe as well as Lorenzo, and there's a question on whether you think that old trees change with time. Does the flavor of the olive change? And if I can get a very quick answer to that, because then there are some technical questions that I need answers to. Go ahead, Lorenzo.
I don't think we have enough information to answer correctly and scientifically that question. The way I answer it is that I think it is, yes, I think it's true that older trees are bearing better fruit, same thing happening with wine. But I like also to talk about the cultural value of that tree. You know, one thing is eating and one thing is having the memory and leaving a legacy. So I think the beauty of dealing with olive trees is that they are living monuments that are giving us something to eat. They are just as valuable as a monument. And
so do they keep going? Do they keep going for forever? Like, do they keep going? Can you like harvest for years and years, or is there a time when an olive oil will say, "Okay, I'm done"?
No, they go on for years and years, and we can still harvest some of the trees that maybe back in, the Romans have planted. The problem is not the tree itself or this single tree. The problem is the groves. We have a lot of, in Italy, we have about 1,500 different varieties of olive trees, but they were all planted back in the old days when the only way of harvesting was hand labor. Now, a lot of those groves that are the most valuable in terms of nutritional content, in terms of, environmental and cultural thing, are going to be pushed out of the market because they can't compete, economically speaking, price point wise, on a global market, with, our main competitor is Spain, and they have ripped off the bulk of their trees, in the last 30 to 40 years. They have replanted the whole thing in order to decrease the cost of production, but they have lost all the biodiversity. They're only using 5 varieties in Spain when we have, hundreds here in Italy. The main problem is the economics of it.
So so we are going to have to address, because everybody's asking, the whole great olive oil fraud issue. But before we do, there's a couple of technical questions which are being asked for members of the audience who seem like they actually might make olive oil themselves. So they're asking a few things. One is, what do you do with your pomace? And do you use clay to protect the fruit? And how long do they let their oils rest before racking?
I'm not sure I have understood all of the question. With the pomace, it's right now, it's one of the hot topics that I'm going through right now. I was just reading, as I was waiting for the meeting to pick up, I was reading a paper of composting it thanks to some fly larvae. And the fly larvae are able to digest the pomace and convert it into animal protein on one side and good compost, stabilized compost on the other side. But this is next for me to come. And do you mind repeating the other question, please?
So the other question then was about, maybe Giuseppe and Skyler can answer this one. Do you use clay to protect your fruit?
No.
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 And then how long do you let your oils rest before racking?
It's a race. The time that it goes inside the basket is ready to go to the mill.
Okay.
No, she means
the oils. Yeah, not the fruit, but the actual oils.
No, this depends on your process. Completely,
Okay.
100% depends on your process. And now you're touching on a hot topic in the industry because people have different methods of doing this, right? If you get your olives from the mill, there's people, or your oil from fresh out of the mill, so it's coming out unfiltered. Some people like to filter immediately. Other people like to put it into a tank, let it decant, and then take off the top part so you're not getting everything all mixed together. Some people only like to let it sit for a month in the decantation process. Other people like to let it sit for 3 months. Like, this is totally up to you, what you want to do. This is a conversation you should have with your chemist. If hopefully you have access to a chemist.
And that's
also, yeah, and also this is why you want to work with a panel. Yeah, you're going to have a difference between an oil that's coming fresh out of the mill and an oil that's been sitting in a tank for a month and an oil that's been sitting in a tank for 3 months. Like, those are totally different products. And then once you have a filtered oil, it's a completely different product. So it depends.
Okay. Lorenzo, what did you want to say about racking?
Yeah, I mainly agree with Skyler. What we do, we specialize in selling fresh olive oil. So we don't filter. We only let it sit maybe 1 day, 2 days into the tank before bottling, so between the press and the bottling. But then it's right out of the farm and straight to our customers. But I teach my customers, I tell people that olive oil should be considered as a seasonal product. As I was saying before, is a fresh juice that is coming out of the flesh of a fruit and is still fresh. I opt for not filtering because a non-filtered olive oil is a better product than the filtered one. And filtering is there in order to extend the shelf life. But we have a new crop coming out in next fall, so there's no reason to extend the shelf life as far as I'm concerned. But we want to change the way we use that oil in the course of the 12 months. We want to know that, again, it's a seasonal product, so we want to use it fresh in the first few weeks and then start and then go on and on.
So we're going to talk about that, but we need to talk a little bit about the fraud in the industry, in the olive oil industry. As you know, it was about maybe 10 years back that all these really bad things came to light. And I will tell you what I think from having tasted and read and been watching this for a long time. It seems to me that the fraud is mostly around the fact that people are selling olive oil, which is not olive oil. So they're calling it olive oil, but it's not olive oil. But how do you feel? And that has been addressed by the law in Italy, by the way, and it is something that is actually considered a criminal offense, and there are many people that have gone to jail for it. And I want to reassure our audience that the Italian government is actually on it and is very serious about it, both the Italian government and the European Commission that follows these things. But what I'm going to ask you is a little different, because when we're talking about it, oil that's adulterated. So if you're selling me, sunflower oil, which is called olive oil, then it's an issue. But what about very large producers, right? So there are large producers, and they are making olive oil, which is entirely olive oil, but it's obviously a very different product than what you do. How do you preserve yourself? Like, how do you make sure that a very large person who makes a very large producer who makes something that legally can still be called extra virgin olive oil and sells it for a ridiculous price, then does not obscure and cancel the kind of work that you do?
I think that the biggest hurdle right now, and what we want to see more work on and towards, is making sure that oils that are labeled properly as extra virgin versus just regular olive oil or virgin olive oil. I think that's a bigger issue right now.
I'm actually
not just in the US, but globally.
I'm actually going to stop you there because we have to move on to the tasting, and we are going to address this because this is a big thing for people. So how do you shop for olive oil? So actually, this is how you shop for olive oil. First of all, I'm going to say that Italian olive oil is the best in the world, so you should buy Italian olive oil. There's probably a little bit of pride in that, but it is true that history, all the history that you've seen, makes a difference. Experience and history make a difference. So what do you look at? Well, first of all, you look at the one biggest thing that you need to look at is the date. You want to make sure that an olive oil is dated. An olive oil is pressed juice, and it should really have an expiration date of no longer than a year. If it has anything longer than that, or it doesn't have that kind of information, then that's already a big telltale sign that you really don't want anything to do with that olive oil, that you're not getting what you're paying for. Then there is also, you trust also the fact that you look at where does it come from? What kind of producer? What is the area? Do they have a what is called a DOP branding, which is something that is controlled by the European Union and looks like a red sun, as well as the Italian government. And it talks about an olive oil which comes entirely from the whole production process happens in the same area. And also, the price is often a giveaway. So if you're buying an olive oil that is called extra virgin olive oil, and the price is somewhere, it's a price that ends with 0.99 and doesn't go above 10, chances are you're not getting a very good olive oil. Olive oil is expensive to make. It takes a while. It's unpredictable. And there just isn't a lot of olive oil. So it's not going to, a $5 olive oil is not going to be a good one. So you do have to consider the price point. Also, always trust, build relationship with both your producers and the people from whom you buy. So buy from someone whom you know has already done the work for you. And last but not least, there is the tasting. And I know you cannot always open a bottle of olive oil and taste it, but I want to teach you tonight how you taste olive oil. And I want to just take 1 second to thank Orietta Gianiorio, who wrote a beautiful book called A Guide to Olive Oil and Olive Oil Tasting, which I used in order to learn this. I already knew a little bit, but she really brought me into depth. So thank you, Orietta. She's a good friend. She lives in Napa. She's from Rome, and it's a sensorial evaluation of olive oil. It's fantastic. So this is how you taste olive oil. So these are specialized glasses. You don't have to have this. You can just have like a brandy sifter or something like that, or even a tiny cup. But one thing is important is that you are able to cover the olive oil as soon as you poured it. So we're going to pour EXAU on the right. And then we're going to pour Casa Caponetti on the left. So we will start with Lorenzo's olive oil, simply because I found it to be a little sweeter, which is not atypical given their regionality. So we'll start with Lorenzo olive oil. And the first thing I do is, you can see I'm covering it. And then I want to warm it a little bit. I want to bring it to about 28 degrees centigrade. And my husband's going to figure out how much that is in Fahrenheit, and I'll tell you in a second. So I'm warming it with my hands and just kind of keeping it here and just kind of feeling cozying up to it. And then I'm going to open this thing with which I closed it. And I'm going to put my nose in it, right? And so my nose goes in it. We are tasting the olive oil. And why am I smelling it? So that's the first thing. And the smell serves because I want to make sure that I understand it gives me an idea of the depth of the olive oil. When I'm smelling for two things. I'm smelling for its intensity and its persistency. So the intensity is how strong it hits me. The persistency is how long it lasts. So think of it of, when you go on a date versus you choose a partner. This is your first date and it really hits you like, oh, wonderful. I want to see how long this wonderful first date is going to stay with me. I can tell you that this first date with Lorenzo is going very, very well. And I keep smelling it, and it's producing these just beautiful fruity things in my, like green apples in my nose that I really love. So the next thing, believe it or not, that you look for is if there's something wrong, right? So olive oil has to have certain characteristics, and the main one is that it needs to be good. It needs not to have any defects, and the defects that you can find are given by storing the olive oil, the transportation, and mostly very, very often the fact that it's not pressed fresh. So these different things that you might smell are things like mold, things like acidity, like acid rancid, a sign that olives were not really taken care of. The olives were bruised, so they were not transported well. They were left with sediments, with muddy sediments, so you could even smell mud. An expert will tell you that things go, these smells are somewhere between like blue cheese, gym socks, dirty clothes, and all sorts of really bad things. But you will know right away because you have it in your bank of memory, you have these smells that are unpleasant to you. So then we are doing we're kind of swirling it, and then we are doing the actual tasting, right? So the tasting is we are using our senses. The taste is just a sense, and we use our taste to determine the flavor. So let's go with the tasting first, and this is going to look a little funny, so you will have to just bear with me. I'm going to take a sip. So what I did with that really kind of, with that noise is I made sure that it went all over my mouth, the top, my palate, my tongue, the back, and especially this thing back here that we call the retronasal passage, to try and find all the different flavors that I am looking for. So the flavors that I am looking at are several, right? So first of all, the basic taste. Is it sweet or is it bitter? There are 5 basic tastes, but when it comes to olive oil, we only use the sweet and bitter. To me, this is definitely sweet. What kind of fruit is it? Is it greener or is it riper? Somewhere in the middle. Lorenzo said you taste almond. I definitely taste green almond. And I don't taste green almond. I taste like a ripe, beautiful, white, milky almond. It is pungent. Yes, it is a little pungent, but not crazily pungent. And by pungent, I mean what we call the spiciness, the thing that sometimes you put in your mouth and it makes you want to cough, right? A lot of people say, oh my God, that's bitter. It's not. It's actually a good thing of the olive oil. It's a sign of a good olive oil that has chlorophyll and polyphenols and all the good things that it needs to have and give it good flavor. Then I'm looking for the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel can be astringent or it can be greasy. Astringent means think of having like something very like a sand in your mouth, like a very dry thing in your mouth, where the greasy is something that really leaves your mouth well coated. So you don't want anything that is too astringent, but obviously you don't want anything that's crazy greasy. Like you don't want butter, you want olive oil. And I find that Lorenzo's olive oil is somewhere right in there. It's a little bit dry in the back, but it's nice and coating my mouth in the front. But that greasiness is also slowly and beautifully disappearing as it warms. And that's exactly what I want. Also, once I've done all that, I want to make sure that the olive oil has good balance. In other words, that there's nothing that is like way out. It's not so much when I score all the different characteristics of olive oil that I want them to be high, is that I want them to be in balance. So if I have one character, if I have, say, like a beautiful pungency, which is just right, but then my other values are really way down here, the olive oil is not going to have balance. And the balance is what is going to make you like the oil. So Lorenzo, you got a 10 from me on a 1 to 10.
Thank you.
The next thing you want to do after you taste it is you want to, one olive oil, you want to rinse your mouth. And eat something like an apple, like a green apple. This is not a green apple, but I didn't have a green one. So just eating a little bit to cleanse my mouth. And now I'm going to Skylar and Giuseppe, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm warming the olive oil. I'm kind of just really loving it. And then I'm going to do the funny slurping sounds and first the smelling, I'm sorry. Oh, so yeah, so this smells like jasmine to me. I don't know if anybody ever told you that, but to me it smells like jasmine. It also smells like viola, like violets a little bit. I just get a lot of flowers in this. And the flowers stay with me as I move away. Again, I want the lasting thing. I want to keep dating my flowers. So next thing I know, then I go ahead after I smelled it and I swirled it. I put it in my mouth, which is now cleansed. It's very, to me, it just tastes like really beautifully ripe. I continue to taste flower, but I also have a little bit of tropical fruit in there. It really stays with me, but nicely. The pungency is right about the same as Lorenzo, not too high, not too low, just right for me. The greasiness, it's a little bit greasier than Lorenzo's oil, especially like on the lips and kind of the front of the mouth. I just love that, and it just keeps going down. And also I find this to be a very, very balanced olive oil. So kudos to both of you. You're both a 10 to me. And now let's talk about how we cook with your olive oils. And I also want to talk just a second of how do people get your olive oil, by the way?
They can purchase, yeah, you guys can purchase on our website and also subscribe to our newsletter, which I think Christina will be sending me for.
All right, so that's wonderful. And how about you, Lorenzo? Can people buy somewhere?
Well, we're only selling only as long as the harvest lasts. So our sales are only open, say, September 15 as a pre-order to November 15, generally speaking. We have a website, it's called justpressed.it, and that's where people can place their orders, or they can email me and I will add them on an email list that we use every year to send an olive oil alert out. Basically, we ask people to sign up so that we know how much to produce, how much do we need, and especially because, again, we specialize in fresh olive oil, so we need to have orders already in so that we can ship out in 48 hours is on the table, right, from harvest, which is
thank you,
which is good.
Sounds great. You may have noticed that I was putting on an apron, and that's because we're now moving to the kitchen, which is like always my favorite place to be. So I am taking both Skylar and Giuseppe and Lorenzo with me, and I'm going to quickly put together a couple of dishes that I developed with their olive oils. And so we are moving to the kitchen now. All right, so we're moving to the kitchen where we have some water boiling for pasta. And I'm going to put some pasta in my water, which I believe has already been salted. Yes, it has. So I'm putting about maybe 6 to 8 ounces of pasta in there, and these are little conchiglie. And while that is cooking, I am going to think about preparing some crostini with Lorenzo's olive oil. So it's a pasta with fish and with fennel for Skyler and Giuseppe. And Lorenzo, I told you that I know the area where you make your olive oil very well, and so it has a very strong emotional charge for me. And one of the most emotionally charged foods that I get when I go to Maremma is bottarga. So I still remember my mother introducing me to bottarga. I was, I think, about 8 when she introduced me to bottarga, and I saw it and I tried it, and it looked like a hand. It looked a little bit like my mother's hand, and it looked like a heart, and I tried it, and I was hooked since then. And so I always associate the flavor of bottarga with my mother and with my times in Maremma. So when I tried your olive oil, it all came together. So it's the beautiful bread without salt, which I actually make myself because you cannot find the bread without salt in the United States. So I toasted some of my bread without salt, which I made last night. And then I decided that I was going to put some ricotta in it. Sheep ricotta is another thing that always makes me think of Maremma. In fact, when we were coming from Perugia, which is the town where I was raised, into Maremma in the summer, we stopped at this place that made ricotta, very close to Montalto di Castro. And by the time we got to the shore, we had like a 2-kilo thing of ricotta. And then in later years, I learned to eat ricotta with bottarga, because when I was little, fish and cheese was like a no-no. You just never did that. But then I grew and I developed my own taste in the kitchen, and I'm a little bit of a rebel when I cook. So I decided that for me, fish and cheese works. So here is some ricotta. I'm going to put some of Lorenzo's olive oil in it, and I'm going to whip this just with a wooden spoon. And I want to kind of make it a little creamy. I'm going to put some glee into this operation because I want to break down the graininess of the ricotta and make it all shiny and beautiful. One of the challenges in developing these dishes is that I didn't want to cook this olive oil. I wanted to taste the freshness. So it was easy enough with the Lorenzo's crostini, but of course it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge with Skyler and Giuseppe's olive oil, a challenge which I have overcome because I do generally overcome challenges in the kitchen. All right, so my ricotta is now nice and creamy, and I have my saltless bread, which is still warm because I took it out of the oven not so long ago. I'm going to take a little bit of garlic, not too much. Well, I'm going to take it, but it fell on the floor. I will be right back. Let me go get a clean piece. So I'm going to take a tiny bit of garlic and I'm going to slightly rub it on the bread. So you want to make sure that you do this when the bread is still hot, as I said, because you want to make sure that that flavor really sits in. So it's kind of just the fragrance of garlic, nothing too much. I just gave it a couple of rubs. And then the other flavor that I really want to seep into this bread is the flavor of Casa Caponetti's olive oil. I am going to be very generous here. I am not skimping. All right. The next thing that I have here for Lorenzo's olive oil is Buddha sand. You guys know what Buddha sand is? Have you ever seen it? Skyler, I know you've seen it because you're from Oakland. But this is a citrus which is very common in California, and it's now in season. And it's somewhere between an orange and a citrus and a Meyer lemon, and I happen to absolutely love it, use it as much as I can. And so I decided that it was going to be good with Lorenzo's olive oil and with the bottarga. So I took about 2 inches of bottarga, shaved it and put it in there with about 2 inches of Buddha sand, and I put some of Lorenzo's olive oil. So the next thing I do is I put some of the ricotta, which I so gleefully whipped, onto my bread. In the meantime, the pasta that is going to go with Skyler and Giuseppe's olive oil is cooking. And the next and last flavor that I brought into this equation for the crostini with Giuseppe is again an herb that always makes me think of my mother, which is marjoram. She had 2 big things of marjoram on her terraces, and I love marjoram. It was my mom's favorite herb, and to this day it's mine. And I think it's particularly delicious with citrus. So I decided to put some marjoram in this. So the first thing that goes on this is the bottarga. I am very liberal with my bottarga. There's never, in my opinion, you can never have too much bottarga. Oh, should I say what bottarga is, by the way? So bottarga is mullet roe that has been dried and pressed. So it's pressed, it's salted, and then it's pressed, and then finally it's hung to dry. And it is absolutely amazing. And it's just like the quintessence of the sea. And like if you were to meet the little mermaid and go in her cave and eat something that she gave to you, this is probably what it would taste like. It's really incredibly amazing. So next thing I do is a little bit of marjoram in here. And then I make some little fancy things with my Buddha sand, and I'm just going to keep it on top. All right, so this was very easy. The only preparation I did was the bottarga that I wanted it to marinate and infuse in Lorenzo's olive oil. Let's get back to the pasta now. So how do I make sure that I don't cook the olive oil, which was given to me by Skylar and Lorenzo. Giuseppe, thank you, by the way. I love it. All right, so I have some cod here that's already that's cooking, and it's already cooked actually. And I am going to just heat it, and then I'm going to take the pasta that is almost cooked, about 2 minutes away from cooking, and I am going to put it in with my cod in a skillet. And I want to have something that stays together and sticks and beautiful creaminess, but I don't want to cook the olive oil. I want to add the olive oil raw. So I bring in a different secret ingredient, which is pasta water. So I'm going to use the pasta water, which is going to be full of starch, which is going to make sure that all the various elements are linked together. So I'm going to finish the pasta just like this. It's going to take about a minute. And in the meantime, I'm going to get everything else ready. So I have some fennel here. Again, I'm in California, so these are fennel flower that I dried myself. The flowers are not in season right now in the fennels, but I was able to get this part of the fennel, which are all the beautiful fresh fronds, right? So these are like the baby fronds. The fennels are coming back. I'm going to be able to get flowers very soon. And the citrus that I chose for Skyler and Giuseppe, you kind of may gather by now that citrus are like a big thing for me, is Meyer lemon, another one of the discoveries in California. So for Giuseppe and Skyler's olive oil, I had a different emotional reaction because even though I intellectually know what Calabria is and where it is and what it does, I've never really spent much time in Calabria. Not when I was little and not even in my later adult years. But I have come to know about Calabria more and more in the past couple of years during my life here, because we have a wonderful author, a writer here, Rosetta Costantino, who is originally from Calabria and does great work to further the cause of Calabria. So through her, I really desired and envisioned what Calabria can be like, and I visited it. And so I associate Calabria, paradoxically, more to my life in California than I do to my life in Italy. Hence the Meyer lemon. So pasta is cooking here. The water is kind of thickening because there's starch in it. And now I have to finish up my part here, which are some lovely toasted breadcrumbs. These are also from my bread. And I've toasted it until they were golden, and I'm going to put some pecorino in it. And yes, cheese and fish is a thing. So then I'm going to put some fennel. Those were my fennel flowers that I have dried and then kind of just minced, put in ground until they look like that. And I'm mixing them, and I think maybe I'm going to put in a little bit of Meyer lemon in it, just a peel for now. And my pasta is almost ready, but I do want to give my fennel fronds a quick mince. All right, so by now, my pasta is nice and thick, and it's definitely cooked, and it already looks creamy, even without the olive oil. But when I take Skyler and Giuseppe's olive oil, and I go on it liberally, it's going to get even better. So what this system does is that it allows the olive oil to go on raw. I have not cooking the olive oil. I'm just putting it on top at the last minute. Once that is done, I'm going to give it some of this herb while it's still very hot so that it can extract maximum flavor from my wild fennel. And then I'm going to put it in this lovely bowl. And I am going to then top it with some of those breadcrumbs with pecorino that you saw me mix. And finally, I will put some more of this herb here. And my very, very, very last thing to do is a little bit of lemon juice just on top. All right, so here are the two dishes for Skylar and Giuseppe's olive oil and for Lorenzo's olive oil. And you may have noticed, and let's go back to our main camera now so we can chat about this. So you may have noticed that I used a lot of olive oil because I have the same philosophy as Lorenzo. Olive oil should be used quickly. Olive oil is only nuovo. When we talk about nuovo, right? Nuovo means new. So really, it's only new for about 3 months. After that, it's not going to be new anymore. So if you want your Olio Nuovo, you should use it within 3 months. And then even after that, you should use it pretty liberally. It doesn't hold for a long time. It's not like wine or vinegar at all. Also, let's talk about storing olive oil. You see how these all have an hermetic seal? So once you're done using your olive oil, make sure you lock it again because air is going to make it oxidize. The other thing is light, dark bottles, right? So Lorenzo uses a tin, and Giuseppe and Skyler use a dark bottle. Light is not good for olive oil. It also helps with the oxidization process. Last but not least, heat. Sometimes I see beautiful bottles of olive oil. They sit on a shelf right on top of the stove. That isn't good. That's not going to work. Your oil is going to be seriously compromised by that. Which is also important to trust the person from whom you buy olive oil because they will have watched every step of the olive oil. They will know how it was made, who made it, how, and also it was transported, which is very important because if the oil gets hot during transportation, it will oxidize and go rancid. Also, a serious olive oil vendor, if you buy an expensive bottle and you decide that you don't like it because it's rancid, because it's not to your taste, because somehow it's off and it had that mold, must, rancid that we talked about, bring it back to them and take it back. I had a store in New York for 2 years and sold a few very expensive olive oil. And if a client came back to me and said, this is really off and I don't like it, I would take it back and I would give them the money back. So please do it. Don't let it just go unnoticed. And a store is much happier to help their clients and make sure they're happy rather than ignore the situation. All right. Are there any more questions for the audience? Or Lorenzo and Skyler, did you want to say some words about your olive oils? We talked about where to get them. We talked about cooking with them. And what else would you like the audience to know?
Not to be scared to use your olive oil or to cook with it. Giuseppe was out here frying with some olive oil over an open flame in the fireplace. So I assure you can cook with olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. It's fine.
And it's funny because I've read, one of the things that I've read is, about the health benefits of olive oil. And olive oil does have health benefits, but you have to use it, right? And so I also want to say that olive oil gives the condition for your health to be good within a number of other things, including a very lovely and wonderful life, like the one that Skyler and Giuseppe have for themselves. So proper storage, do not put it in the fridge. We talked about making sure that it's hermetically sealed. Keep it away from the heat, keep it away from the light, use it quickly. It's actually better to buy, both of you do a half a liter of olive oil. Do not buy a liter bottle of olive oil unless you know that you're going through it very quickly. I use a lot of olive oil, so I actually buy it in 5 liter tin, and I go through a 5 liter tin in probably less than a month. But I put my olive oil from the tin into a smaller bottle, and just for a practice of use. And when you do that, it's the same thing. You put it in the olive oil in the smaller bottle, make sure it's a dark bottle, and make sure you can cap it, seal it hermetically. Keep it away from light, keep it away from heat. And do not keep your olive oil for a long time. And if you want to buy different kinds of olive oil, that's great. Generally, what I like to do is I like to have olive oil that are at the opposite end of the spectrum. So you have an olive oil that's very heavy on sweetness, one that's heavy on bitterness, and then a bunch of things in between. The way that you pair them, it's either by contrast or by complement. Contrast meaning you contrast the two flavors. So you put a sweet olive oil with a food that's, say, like high in acidity or a bitter food, and you put a bitter olive oil with a sweeter food. Or you just kind of complement each other, so that, for example, one of the things that I did when I tried Lorenzo's olive oil, the almond hit me so hard that I took a date. Like I took a fresh date and I just kind of put it on a plate and put the olive oil on top. And it was like amazing. It was incredible. And we also talked about the fact that it is a seasonal thing, but it is also an oil is a food that lasts does last you for a year. Its character changes, no doubt. It's not that its flavor is bad. I mean, olive oil that was harvested, that was made in November will still be plenty good in May. But it will certainly change. And maybe, Lorenzo, you can give us a little bit of how you think it changes.
Well, it mellows out for sure. I mean, the first few weeks is Olio Nouvo, which is where I want to bath in it. That's all I eat for the first month or so. And it's very pungent, and sometimes it might be too overpowering for some delicate dishes. Then, of course, in the going on of the season, it mellows out. Some of the more edgy flavors are mellowing out, and it gets rounder. But that's good, because that's when the tomatoes come in, and and I like combining those two things. And as you said, then it will change even more. I don't dare cook with a fresh olive oil, as you said, first couple of months at least, if not more. But then later on, of course, we want to use it and to cook. And the other good thing about the olive oil is that it never spoils. So you want to buy and you want to use it fresh. But if by any chance you don't, it's never gonna kill you, because there's no bacteria that can grow in it, because there's no nitrogen base, no water, no sugars in the olive oil.
All right.
It means that you can use it to bake. If everything goes bad, you can still use it to bake.
Baking with olive oil, I'm just going to say one little thing about that. If you want to swap out olive oil for butter, it's not a 1-to-1 thing. It's about like a 3/4 olive oil per amount of butter, by the way. But do try swapping it out. It really does. It really can work quite well. And also, what we learned today is you want to look at the date, you want to look at the provenance, you want to trust the origin and trust the seller of the olive oil. Use as much as you can, store it well, away from light, away from heat, and make sure it's hermetically sealed whenever you're finished with it. And just enjoy it and love it. And thank you so much, so much to Giuseppe and Skyler and Lorenzo for taking the time to wake up. I'm actually amazed that you're not all in your pajamas. That's incredible. Thank you so much. Love your olive oil. So EXAU is at EXAU Olive Oil on Instagram. Lorenzo is at Agriturismo Casa Caponetti. And I am Viola Buitoni. You can also find me on Instagram, where you can see about my classes and my activities. And I am at Viola Buitoni on Instagram. So it seems Instagram is everybody's favorite platform, and we hope to see you there. Thank you to the MOFAD and to the Greene Space and to Food for Thought, and have a lovely evening. Thank you, Giuseppe, Skyler, Lorenzo. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Grazie. Ciao.
Thank you.